The painting you see here, completed in 1948, is titled Number 5 by Jackson Pollock. In 2006, this painting sold for $140 million. This may come as a shock to many of you. I mean, it's honestly fair. A similar work has probably been made in a kindergarten class by rolling around a paint-covered golf ball. Please don't think I'm bashing Pollock, though. He fundamentally changed fine art as the father of abstract expressionism. You simply can't take a modern or contemporary art course without learning about his work. The demand for his work is significant today, as nearly every modern art museum and well-regarded private collector is expected to have a Pollock. Pollock was well known for the way that he created art, often painting on the ground, using unstretched canvas and house paint. I've spent hours observing Pollock's work, watching the lines as they intertwine and create a complex narrative of shapes. Clement Greenberg, a renowned critic of Pollock's work, believed the art was paint about paint. Greenberg believed Pollock was drawing on specific elements of art as the content, rather than depicting visual space within our world. This work and its following movements of minimalism and reduction painting became artwork that was only really relevant to those within the sector of visual arts. No longer was it necessary for painting to reflect an environment relative to anyone's knowledge. I believe there's some element of truth in Greenberg's description of why Pollock's work was so art historically impactful. However, I want to challenge the work as coming from a place of personal need to sustain oneself, in addition to this widely considered creative genius. In the last 30 years, the top 1% of Americans have gained over $21 trillion, while the lower 50% have actually lost money, equivalent to approximately $900 billion. As inflation and price gouging continue to rise, the value of money is decreasing. Meanwhile, workers are being compensated at the same rate. The working class is being forced to produce exponentially more out of the necessity to simply survive. Unfortunately, something we can't produce more of is time. There comes a point where time, along with human needs, restricts the amount of work that can be produced. No longer is one work week enough to sustain the worker. Therefore, the process of production has been forcibly changed, maximizing time by reducing the quality of the work. I call this shift a modularization of work. A modularization of work is the act of producing more in less time. Assembly line production was popularized in Detroit in 1913. Henry Ford designed the system as a way to reduce the amount of time it took to manufacture early automobiles. This decreased the production cost of cars, enabling more affordable prices. And this opened up access to the middle class to purchase cars and drove up profits for Ford. Although the assembly line production system was beneficial for Ford, in return, it created a less innovative workforce. Employees were taught to complete one small part of a larger product. If there was a discrepancy within a previous step, it's likely the next employee within the chain wouldn't catch this issue prior to completion, leading to a lower quality product. The assembly line system has since been widely popularized and continues to have an impact on our society today. Now, Jackson Pollock modularized his work. Instead of using fine artist pigments, he used house paint. Instead of using handmade brushes, he used sticks and stiffened brushes, in addition to just pouring the paint right out of the can. Instead of stretching a canvas and priming the surface, a process that consists of multiple rounds of priming and sanding the stretched fabric, Pollock used raw, unstretched canvas, simply laid it on the ground. Pollock likely worked on more than one piece at a time in order to continue working while others tried. In addition to making artwork that is extremely hard to preserve, Pollock popularized a process that permitted faster production. Whether or not this was intentional is irrelevant because it was necessary. Pollock was not independently wealthy. In fact, he likely fell within the starving artist stereotype and modularized his work in order to realistically produce at the speed necessary to sustain himself. Given that art is often seen as a reflection of culture, the change in process present in Pollock's work demonstrates an important shift of modularization leaking from the physical production line into the ideology of the broader culture. Art must be popularized and socially accepted to be considered relevant, especially a relevance equivalent to tens of millions of dollars today. The acceptance of artwork like Pollock's demonstrates an important cultural shift caused by modularization, a shift towards a cultural acceptance of reduction. A large portion of you are college students. Think about your education. If a professor gives you the option to read 50 pages or watch a video on those 50 pages, you're going to pick the video, in part because it will hold our ever-decreasing attention spans, but also because it's the easier thing to do. As with any translation, the video cannot effectively communicate all aspects of the original text. Yet our culture tells us that a subpar translation is better than a likely alternative of an absence of any comprehension. By watching the video, you are modularizing your work. Meanwhile, our cultural acceptance of reduction is affirming your lack of comprehension. I'm currently working on a series of work surrounding the idea of an illusion of progress. This term was introduced to me at the Gwangju Biennial in South Korea after viewing the installation titled Terminal Destiny by artist Jawan Yu. According to the biennial's description, this work is a continuation of his research into contemporary conditions that propel relentless modes of production. You see such an illusion of progress achieved at the expense of environmental destruction. I became obsessed with this term, illusion of progress. It just stuck with me. I started questioning everything around me related to our progressing society. I listened to my friends as they talked about their family history, or watched and analyzed peers and mentors' relationship to work. I resonated with a feeling of dependence on my phone and other technology, as well as a lack of basic functional understanding of the things I use in my everyday life. I wanted to figure out what progress really even means, and how do we measure it? As Americans, we live in a society that directly correlates progress with production. This falls nicely in line with Jawan Yu's description of contemporary conditions that propel relentless modes of production, curating this illusion of progress. But I wasn't satisfied with this description. Living in Italy earlier last year, I became accustomed to a slower way of living. During class times, there was an emphasis on taking breaks and having a separation of life and work. Going out to dinner wasn't a 30-minute meal rushed out by the waiter, but instead 3-hour-long dinners that turned to social time. This led me to thinking progress must be something more than production. Progress is a version of change that promotes something better. So, is it aging progress? What about preventing your child from experiencing the same hardships you did? We tend to forget about these other forms of progress as our cultural acceptance of reduction narrows our field of vision. Measuring these marginalized forms of progress on a societal scale is tricky, I dare say nearly impossible, and we have been tunnel visioned into productional progress. I believe that our cultural acceptance of reduction, brought about by mass modularization, is a big piece of our illusion of progress. So how far will we allow this cultural acceptance of reduction to go? With the accessible introduction of devices like ChatGPT and other chatbots, we now have the potential to modularize our own thoughts. We live in a society where our devices have been designed to trigger addictive instincts in our brains. Every day, significant amounts of time, which we previously defined as being so valuable, is being poured into apps designed to feed our want to consume. While media apps continue to be fed by our addictions, we are turning to devices like ChatGPT to modularize our creativity and thinking, characteristics that define us as uniquely human. We sit now on the brink of another type of industrial revolution. This time, instead of modularizing production, we are modularizing our own thoughts. Modularization of production wasn't a completely negative thing, though, right? I mean, the working class got cars, and assembly line production opened access to a better standard of living for a growing American population. Similarly, there are applications of AI that are doing great things. An AI platform developed in 2015 analyzes employee performance reviews in addition to personal identification factors like race and gender in order to assess if a company is providing equal pay to its employees. With the exception of the individual who wrote the performance review, This platform is removing human bias from the picture and creating a more equitable work environment. Similarly, there are numerous positive implications of AI in healthcare. This technology will and should be developed. However, as a society, we need to question if our cultural acceptance of reduction is eating away at aspects of our humanity. So what can we do about this? I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think that we can start with curiosity. Let's take time to question the insane world that we live in. There are deep complexities in history all around us. Instead of scrolling, engage in your environment and activate your creativity and awareness. Go for a walk and actually pay attention to the things you see around you. Maybe you'll suddenly realize how interesting the form of exterior air conditioning units are. Or become obsessed with a certain style of handrails that seems to litter your neighborhood. These observations could push you towards new developments and inspire new thinking. Let's fight the addictive urge to constantly reduce ourselves. The moments of transition when we are alone at a party or waiting for our name to be called at the doctor's office, instead of pulling out your phone to further modularize your work, engage with the environment around you. I think we'll all be surprised at the things we miss on a daily basis. Technology has always been meant to improve our lives, yet over and over again, it proves to blur the line between our personal and work lives. We are being expected to use technology to further modularize our lives as it pushes productivity. Devices like the Humane AI Pen and Apple's new Vision Pro will only push this further. Instead of prioritizing productivity, let's prioritize other forms of progress in our lives. Let's find validation in taking long dinners and progressing our communities. Do research on those handrails that piqued your curiosity and progress your own knowledge. We talked about what Greenberg thought of Pollock's work. Paint about paint, right? But while Pollock was alive, he outright said that his art had no objective meaning. For him, it was about the content came from the ritual of making his work. An expression of curiosity and movement fills each of his strokes. This certainly won't fix all of our problems, but what if we start by finding something to be ritualistic about? Something that, like Pollock's paintings, we can do over and over again, performed through a new creative lens. And with that, we may be able to stop reducing ourselves. Thank you.